The last flicker of light in Captain Elias Marlowe's cockpit died with a shuddering cough. A cascade of sparks traced a path across the console as the shuttle Helios Vanguard lurched violently, its thrusters sputtering beneath the twin suns of Novastra Prime. He gripped the yoke, knuckles white as the world beyond the windshield fractured into blurs of crimson dust and distant rock spires. Then came the impact. Metal groaned, glass cracked, and Elias was hurled forward until his harness snapped taut. For a heartbeat he couldn't breathe. Then the world came rushing back as pain exploded across his ribs. He tasted blood. His vision swam with red. The shuttle's lights flickered back on in a discordant strobe, casting erratic shadows over the battered interior. He unhooked himself, every movement sending white-hot agony through his body. Through a haze of painkillers, he registered the emergency beacon blinking ominously. 0.3% power. Beneath him, the floor panel had caved in, tools and debris strewn like fallen soldiers. Elias struggled to his feet, then half-carried, half-stumbled toward the hatch. Outside, Novastra Prime greeted him with a blast of frigid wind that smelled of iron and ozone. The sky was a bruised purple, mottled with swirls of pollutant clouds, a grim reminder that this world had once been paradise before the terraform wars scarred it beyond repair. Two pale suns, Algor and Vescor, hovered low on the horizon, their combined light weaving long, shifting shadows across the barren, rust-colored plains. He dropped to one knee, planted the emergency pack, and crawled toward the crater his shuttle had carved into the ground. Every step seared with burning pain in his side. Every breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. Yet he pressed on, driven by the single imperative that had defined his career: survive. The crater yawned wide and unforgiving. At its lip lay a shard of the shuttle's hull, jagged and twisted like a broken spine. Elias ducked beneath it, scanning the depths for any sign of life. At first, he saw only the shuttle's undercarriage, steam hissing from ruptured coolant lines. But then, movement. A faint glow no bigger than a child's wrist pulsed from the far side of the crater. Elias froze, adrenaline surging. He fumbled for his sidearm, but something in him hesitated, a whisper of doubt amid the chaos. He tightened his grip on the pistol and crawled forward, each inch of progress measured by the rasp of his breath. When he rounded the last bend of metal and rock, he blinked against the light. There, huddled in the crater's shadow, was a figure so delicate it might have been a trick of the mind. She was seated on her heels, shoulders drawn up in a protective curve, knees tucked tight beneath her. The broken hull piece formed a canopy just large enough to shield her from the bitter wind. Her skin was pale. No, not pale, but iridescent, like mother of pearl refracting the dying suns. Even in dim light, it shimmered with subtle hues of violet and aquamarine. Her hair fell in silver-white tendrils around her narrow shoulders, cascading down her back in a fluid waterfall of light. The most striking feature, however, were her eyes, enormous, almond-shaped, and a deep, fathomless violet that seemed to absorb everything around her. When she spoke, it was not with words, but with a series of soft, melodic clicks and whistles that reverberated in Elias's chest like distant wind chimes. He froze, pistol half raised, heart hammering in his throat. The fellow he'd trained with would have fired first and asked questions never. But something about this creature, this girl, stilled his trigger finger. Instead, he eased the pistol into its holster and pressed a gloved hand against his side. Pain lanced through him, but he forced himself to smile. "Easy," he murmured, voice rough from disuse. He reached behind his seat, tore free his thermal blanket, and approached slowly, hands raised in peace. She flinched, drawing herself tighter into the hull's curve. Elias knelt beside her, careful to keep his weight on his heels. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, voice as gentle as he could make it. The translator chip on his uniform emitted a soft beep, searching for recognizable linguistic patterns. "Can you understand me?" The girl's clicks stuttered, and she tilted, her head regarding him with a mixture of curiosity and terror. Her shoulders quivered. Whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. He unfolded the blanket deliberately, letting it fall across his outstretched arms like an offering. The fabric was thick, insulated to withstand the vacuum of space. "Here," Elias said, voice soft. "It's warm." He draped one corner of the blanket over her shoulder. Beneath that lantern glow, her skin's iridescence deepened, casting prismatic speckles across the metal hull. She gasped, soft, almost breathless, and her violet eyes widened. With trembling fingers, she reached out and brushed the blanket's edge. Elias saw her whole body relax as warmth spread from the fabric into the freezing air around them. He watched her close her eyes, as if to commit the sensation to memory. In that instant, the shuttle's broken rear thruster groaned, a reminder of the world they inhabited. Elias pressed the universal translator button again. "My name is Elias Marlowe. What's yours?" She inhaled sharply, and the translator blinked twice before emitting a single word in his own voice. "Sci-Fi." Elias froze. The translator wasn't supposed to work on an unknown language without a common root. Yet here it was, rendering her clicks into clear English. He blinked, looked at her. She met his gaze, and for a moment, time suspended itself in the crater. Two isolated souls cast together on a hostile world. "Sci-Fi," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "Thank you for taking the blanket." She nodded, slow and deliberate, and drew the fabric tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes brimmed with quiet gratitude that needed no translation. Above them, the twin suns dipped farther toward the horizon. The temperature would plummet soon. Elias scanned the landscape. No sign of other life, no nearby outpost, no rescue in sight. He drew in a breath, the wind carrying the taste of oxidized metal and distant storms. He had a choice. Stay here with Sci-Fi in the crater's cold shadow, or climb back into the wreckage to salvage parts for a distress signal. He glanced at her, vulnerable beneath the blanket, her slender form cocooned in that fragile promise of warmth. And he knew his choice. "Stay here," he said, voice firm but kind. "I'll get help." Sci-Fi's gaze followed his hand as he turned away, already planting his palms against the rough metal of the hull. Elias gritted his teeth and heaved, climbing up, patching circuits with trembling fingers, fighting the cold and the pain. Beneath him, he could feel the girl's eyes, bright and watchful, as though she were reaching out to him beyond words. As the suns finally sank behind the distant dunes, Elias tightened the last bolt on the makeshift transmitter. The device flickered to life, its feeble signal fighting through interference and atmospheric distortion. He fell to one knee, chest heaving, and activated the distress beacon. A single, pulsing call echoed into the vastness of space. An SOS, cast into the void, a promise that he would return for her. Below, in the crater's gathering darkness, Sci-Fi pressed her hand against the blanket and whispered a soft click of her own. It was the only answer he needed. Dawn broke over Novastra Prime in shifting hues of lavender and rose, thin light slanting across the dunes and into the crater where Elias and Sci-Fi waited. He emerged from the shuttle's hatch carrying 2 insulated canisters of reconstituted rations and a med kit. Sci-Fi sat on a flat stone that jutted from the crater wall, the blanket draped around her like ceremonial robes. Her eyes tracked him warily as he approached. "Here," he offered, setting the canisters on the ground between them. He twisted one open and held it out. "Water," and protein paste. It's not much, but it'll keep you strong until help arrives. Serafa's violet eyes flickered with gratitude. She lowered herself carefully, and her fingers, slender as tendrils, wrapped around the cylinder. Through the translator, her clicks emerged as a single word: gratitude. Elias sat cross-legged opposite her. He unscrewed his own canister, and they ate in silence. The only sounds the rasp of their chewing and the wind moaning through the hollowed hull above them. With each mouthful, Serafa's breaths steadied. Elias noticed the fine lines at the corners of her eyes relax. The translator on his wrist chimed softly, pulling fragments of her language into something he could understand. Once the rations were gone, Elias ripped open the medkit and produced antiseptic gel and bandages. "Your knees looked scraped," he said, gently pressing the gel into a shallow gash. Serafa tensed, then relaxed as the cool solution soothed her skin. "It burns, I know, but this will help." She nodded, eyes closing momentarily. When she opened them again, the translator's synthetic voice carried her thought. "Trust." He smiled and glanced at the partially repaired distress beacon mounted on a small tripod beside the shuttle. The transmission had gone out, sporadic, bursts of weak signal, but nothing reliable yet. He needed to work the antenna, order spare power cells from orbit, or risk being stranded indefinitely. Yet he found himself hesitating, unwilling to turn away from Serafa's luminous presence. She shifted the blanket aside and stood. Elias scrambled to his feet. "Are you cold?" he asked. "I can—" He stopped short as Serafa reached for his wrist, pressing her palm against the translator module. A tingle surged up his arm and the world tilted. In that instant, Elias saw her home, soaring crystal towers bathed in emerald light, rivers of liquid luminescence winding between floating gardens. He felt the rush of wind through her people's telepathic network, an intimate chorus of thoughts and emotions, each soul a note in a cosmic symphony. He tasted the bitterness of loss as a great catastrophe had shattered their world, scattering survivors across the galaxy. He gasped and staggered backward, hand flying to his temple. Serafa caught him, her own eyes wide with concern. Slowly the images receded, leaving Elias breathless and trembling. He looked down at her outstretched hand. The translator blinked, then spoke for her. "Forgive me. I did not mean to overwhelm." Elias swallowed. "You didn't hurt me," he said, voice husky. "You showed me home." He closed his eyes, letting the after-images glide across his mind's eye. "Thank you." He placed his hand over hers. The translator captured his touch and converted it into gentle, warmth-filled clicks. "Thank you for your trust." A fragile bond formed between them in that simple exchange. Words had their place, but touch was their true bridge. With renewed purpose, Elias guided Serafa inside the shuttle. The interior was cramped and battered, but the interior heaters still worked. He flipped switches to flood the cabin with gentle warmth, the temperature rising enough that the emergency blanket felt less crucial. Serafa peeled it away, revealing a simple tunic of soft, silky fibers that shimmered with iridescence beneath the cabin lights. Elias rummaged through storage lockers and pulled out a compact toolkit and extra wiring harnesses. "Help me patch the power array," he said, scavenging a length of conduit. She watched curiously, then leaned in close as he stripped insulation from a frayed cable. "Careful," he warned, but Serafa's slender fingers hovered, offering silent concentration. Together they spliced wires and sealed connections with hydrogel adhesive. Every time their hands met, once to hold a wire steady, once to guide the soldering wand, a spark of connection leapt between them. Elias felt the familiar thrum of loneliness ease for the first time since his shuttle went down. Serapha's melodic clicks punctuated the air, and the translator rendered her feelings: hope, pride, companionship. By midday, the power grid hummed steadily. The cabin lights brightened, and the life support screens flickered back to normal. Elias slapped the console in satisfaction. "Good work," he said, offering Serapha a grin. She returned it, the first pure smile he had seen on her lips. A curve of delicate light that banished the exhaustion from her face. They settled back near the cockpit, and Elias pulled up the holo display. The distress beacon signal was stronger now, a steady pulse that would guide rescue ships home. He tapped controls to patch the universal translator into the main comm channel. "Let me try something," he said. He keyed the mic. On frequencies monitored by starliners and patrol craft, he broadcasted in Serapha's own clicks, retranslated by the interface into the galactic standard. "Stranded vessel on Novastra Prime. Injured life form aboard. Proceed to coordinate 23.7 by 11.4. He turned to Serapha. "Can you hear it?" Her eyes filled with wonder as the melodic pattern of her language, so intimate and fluid, sounded clear through the speakers. The translator's voice struck, a perfect note between her clicks and his words. Serapha lifted a hand and touched the speaker grill, as though greeting an old friend. Elias felt a thrill. Not only had he saved her from freezing to death, but together they had sent a call that might rescue an entire remnant of her people, if they still lingered in hidden colonies across distant worlds. As twilight fell again, painting the cabin, in soft gold, Elias and Serapha sat side by side, letting the shuttle's hum lull them into quiet companionship. Words were no longer a barrier. Touch had become their true language. Each gentle brush of fingers carried far more weight than any phrase, and in that shared silence, Elias realized that he had found something he never knew he needed. A partner, a confidant, and perhaps the first spark of something deeper. Beyond the walls of the broken shuttle, Novastra's two suns sank behind swirling clouds of phosphorescent dust. But inside, in the warmth of light and newly forged friendship, hope glowed brighter than any dusk. Morning's first pale rays slanted through the shuttle's cracked viewport as Elias Marlowe clambered onto the roof to finish repairing the comm relay. The zinc alloy dish lay half-buried under a pile of radiator fins and scorched wiring. Elias pried away the debris, his gloves scraping metal and sparking dead circuits back to life. Every twist of his wrench echoed through the cavernous hull, a heartbeat of hope against the endless stillness of Novastra's plains. Below him, Serapha watched from the cracked hatch, the emergency blanket pooled around her like liquid moonlight. Elias checked the last power cell. Its charge was low but stable. He connected the final lead and ducked back inside as the dish tilted skyward with a hiss of hydraulics. "Let's see if this holds," he murmured, flipping the switch on the control panel. The dish whined, then stuttered into a steady hum. On the holo display, the signal meter gently rose from the red zone into yellow. Elias pumped a triumphant fist in the air, only to freeze when he saw Serapha inch toward the blanket, eyes wide. She laid a single hand on the fabric's center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the threads began to shimmer, weaving themselves into patterns of soft azure and emerald light. The glow pulsed in time with Serapha's heartbeat, slow, resonant, alive. Elias stepped forward. "Serapha, what?" His words caught in his throat as the blanket lifted from her shoulders, hovering in midair. Filaments of light streamed from its edges, spiraling upward like ribbons of stardust. The entire cabin was bathed in a gentle luminescence, and above the blanket a three-dimensional tableau bloomed. a galaxy of crystal spires emerging from rivers of liquid light, floating blossoms unfurling in zero gravity, a chorus of shimmering forms dancing across space. Sci-Fi pressed her palms together at her chest, her violet eyes shining with something between reverence and relief. Elias approached slowly, every step pushing past the familiar boundaries of reality. This was no simple thermal fabric. It was a repository of memory, a living archive of her people's history and dreams. He reached out, fingertips brushing one of the light ribbons. It felt cool, almost liquid, and at his touch the projected galaxy rippled, folding open to reveal scenes closer to home. A crystalline amphitheater where elders sang in unison, their voices weaving telepathic harmonies. A garden floating in mist where Sci-Fi had once chased dragonflies of pure photon. A wide courtyard lined with sky trees whose leaves refracted every color of the spectrum. Each vision was accompanied by a soft echo in his mind, a fragrance of sun-warmed stone, the taste of sweet nectar, the reverberation of communal joy. Elias stumbled back, breathless, as Sci-Fi's whispered clicks trailed through the translator. Our songs, our stories, our souls. He swallowed hard. It's beautiful, he choked out. You've given me everything I never knew. He knelt beside her as the projections faded into a constellation of pinpricks, then vanished altogether, leaving only the blanket's faint glow. Sci-Fi draped the gift back over her shoulders, tucking it closely against her. My gift, the translator rendered, to show you who we are so you understand why we cannot vanish. A distant rumble shook the shuttle's hull. Elias looked up through the battered viewport. A sandstorm was rolling in, enormous walls of iridescent dust churning across the plains. If the storm hit before rescue arrived, it would fry electronics, bury the shuttle, and bury them both beneath tons of corrosive grit. He sprang to his feet. The storm's coming, fast. We need to get this blanket somewhere safe. He grabbed Sci-Fi's hand and guided her to the cockpit. Through the sliding bulkhead he swept aside shattered panels and yanked free a cushioned crate from storage. Together they wove the blanket inside, then propped the crate against the hatch for extra shielding. Sci-Fi's eyes brimmed with concern. We must protect it. The translator's voice quavered with her fear. Elias fastened the crate shut. I will, he promised. I swear it. Lightning bright flares flickered across the viewport as the storm hit. The shuttle shuddered, groans of stressed metal rippling through every beam. Inside, the lights flickered, life support alarms chimed with rising urgency, and the temperature plummeted. Elias activated the backup heaters and clamped a hand over his ears to block the ringing in his head. He turned to Sci-Fi. Hold on, he said, voice hoarse. She nodded, pressing herself against the bulkhead. Together they watched the world outside dissolve into roiling chaos, an ocean of copper wind and shimmering sand lit by distant, purple-hued lightning. When the worst passed, an eerie calm followed. The storm receded as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a battered landscape of flattened dunes and uprooted rock spires. Elias exhaled, arms trembling with adrenaline and relief. He sprinted to the crate, pried it open, and found the blanket intact. Its glow faint but steady. Sci-Fi stepped forward, touching the fabric reverently. Elias knelt beside her, brushing grit from its surface. I'll call the rescue ships when they answer our beacon, he said, wiping sweat and sand from his brow. And when they come, we'll show them what you've shown me. The galaxy should know who you are. Sci-Fi's violet eyes filled with tears. No translator needed to read her gratitude and hope. Elias wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling the gentle weight of the blanket and the heavier weight of responsibility settle across them both. As the suns dipped low once more, painting the ruined plains in amber light, Elias Marlowe and Serapha stood side by side, conceived of two very different worlds yet united by a simple truth. The gift of light can illuminate even the darkest. The night air settled into a deathly hush after the storm, the twin suns' afterglow fading to a bruised purple sky. Inside the shuttle, Elias Marlowe secured the last of the damage control seals, his fingers slick with sand and sweat. Serapha waited beside the crate that held her radiant blanket, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of the emergency lights. For a moment, they simply breathed. Two survivors in the heart of a hostile world. Then came the distant roar. Elias froze, pulse hammering. He exchanged a look with Serapha, hers wide with alarm, the translator's soft click rendering her fear. He hurled aside the toolkit and sprinted to the viewport. Beneath the frame, massive shapes undulated across the dunes, creatures as large as cargo transports, their segmented carapaces plated in burnished obsidian, glowing veins of bioluminescent crimson pulsing along their limbs. Beetles, Elias whispered, voice tight. These were carnivorous scavengers native to Novastra, ravenous, relentless, and nearly impervious to small arms fire. Their antennae sliced through the storm's leftover dust like twin whips, probing every ridge and hollow for prey. Serapha's hand found his. Her violet eyes shone with terror, and the translator caught her thought in a single trembling phrase. "They will tear us apart." "We'll stop them," Elias said, the words tasting brittle on his tongue. He grabbed his rifle from its rack and slung it over his shoulder. "Get behind me." They crouched by the hatch as the first of the owl. Beetles clattered against the shuttle's hull, each impact vibrating through the metal like the toll of a great bell. Elias pressed his back to the door, rifle at the ready, Serapha's hand slipping into his. He could feel her heart pounding in sync with his own. "Stay low," he murmured. "Wait for my shot." Through the viewport he saw one beast rear on, its hind legs, mandibles clicking open. Elias took aim, squeezing the trigger. The pulse rifle's beam lanced through the gloom, striking the creature's side. The beetle shrieked, a hideous, grinding sound, and toppled backward. A second shot, and its companion plunged into the sand, scattered sparks flickering where armored plating cracked. But more were coming. The dunes behind them churned with movement, the stamping of so many legs that the ground seemed alive. Elias fired again and again, each shot a bitter necessity. Yet he knew his ammo would not last. The creatures were too many and closing in. Serapha slipped from behind him and knelt by the crate. Her hand hovered over the blanket's surface. Elias turned, confusion and concern warring on his features. She pressed her palm against the crate's barrier and closed her eyes. A soft hum rose in the shuttle, the ceiling panels vibrating with suppressed energy. Light began to leak through the cracks, a pale blue glow growing until it suffused the cramped cabin. The beetles' roars faltered, and Elias watched as they paused at the doorway, antennae twitching. He pivoted back to the hatch as a dome of iridescent light unfurled around the shuttle's exterior, shimmering like a soap bubble in the dying light. The nearest beetles recoiled, their mandibles clacking in confusion, then skittered away into the dunes. One by one they turned and fled, until only the fading echoes of their retreat remained. Elias dropped to his knees, rifle clattering, to the floor. He sprinted to the crate, prying it open. Serapha stood within its protective circle, the blanket's glow pulsing softly around her like a heartbeat. She met his gaze, exhaustion and relief mingling in her luminous eyes. "You saved us again," Elias breathed, lifting her hand to his lips. The translator spoke her thought unbidden. "It is not my power alone, but your courage." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and guided her to the cockpit. The storm had chewed through the last of the shuttle's remaining external wiring, and the distress beacon flickered erratically on the holo display. "We need to get off this rock," he said. "Rescue ships will respond soon, but only if they can track us." Serapha pressed her hand against the console. A cascade of light spilled across the controls as the blanket's energy interfaced with the shuttle's systems. The holo display steadied, the beacon's pulse leveling into the steady heartbeat that meant a signal strong enough to cut through orbital interference. Elias's chest tightened. "Good work," he said, voice thick. "Once they homing signal locks on, we'll have hours, maybe days before they arrive. We can't stay here." He guided Serapha to the hatch and replaced the crate's shielding for transport. Then, with painstaking care, he strapped her into the co-pilot seat. "Hold tight," he said, strapping himself into the pilot's chair. Engines idled as he engaged the secondary thrusters. Outside, the battered dunes glowed faintly in the blanket's light, as though Novastra itself recognized this fragile alliance. Elias took a deep breath and pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle shuddered, then roared to life, its scarred hull emitting a plume of parched dust. Serapha reached out, her slender fingers brushing his arm. The translator's gentle voice carried her question, "Will we survive?" Elias glanced at her and forced a grin. "We will," he promised. "Together." As the shuttle lifted from the crater, the horizon split open in streaks of violet and rose. Below, the beetles scuttled back into their lairs, and the blanket's light faded into the night. Elias set a course for the rendezvous coordinates. Every star above a silent vow, the engines of the Helios Vanguard thrummed beneath Elias Marlowe's seat as he guided the shuttle off Novastra Prime's scarred surface. Through the cockpit viewport, the broken dunes receded, pockmarked craters, shattered rock spires, and the faint lingering glow where Serapha's blanket had sealed their sanctuary. Each pulse of the thrusters carried him farther from the world that had tested them, and yet his heart remained tethered to that small, iridescent figure beside him. Serapha sat in the co-pilot's chair, the emergency crate now open at her feet. The blanket lay across her knees, its soft blue and green filaments still faintly alive with memory. She stroked the fabric as one might cradle a life-worn diary, her violet eyes reflecting both sorrow and determination. Elias cleared his throat. "We've got a narrow window before the orbital patrol picks up our signal," he said, glancing at the holo display. The distress beacon's steady heartbeat confirmed that help was en route. "They'll rendezvous at rendezvous point Delta 7 in..." He checked the timer. 4 hours. Serapha nodded but did not look at him. Instead, she reached out and touched the viewport, as though pressing her palm against an invisible barrier that separated her from everything she loved. Elias watched her breath fog the glass, then whispered, "I wish I could stay longer." She turned, and for the first time he noticed the tremor in her slender shoulders. The translator quivered, to life. "There is much to do. My people. They need to remember." He drew a ragged breath. "I know." Elias slid open a storage compartment and produced a small data module, an encrypted archive of the shuttle's logs, images, and, most importantly, the holographic recordings of Serapha's blanket projections. "Take this," he said, handing it to her. "It holds everything you showed me, your cities, your gardens, your songs." Serapha accepted the module with both hands, eyes brightening. "So our history will survive," the translator rendered. "Exactly," Elias confirmed. He paused, searching for words that might bridge light years of difference. "When we reach the patrol ships, I'll brief them on everything. They'll know what you've endured, and why you deserve sanctuary." Tears welled in Serapha's eyes, tears of gratitude, of hope. She pressed the blanket's corner to her lips, then laid it over the module as though consecrating it. "Your compassion has given us light," she whispered through the translator, "and I will carry it. To every lost soul I can find." Elias felt a swell in his chest, a mixture of pride and sorrow. He slid out of his seat and knelt before her, placing a hand over hers. "Serapha, my world doesn't have your songs, your telepathy, but I'll carry your story in my heart, as long as I live." A soft smile curved her lips, alien and achingly beautiful. She reached up, brushing a silver-white tendril of hair from his face. The translator captured the gentle emotion. "And you have given me a family among the stars." Behind them, the shuttle vaulted into the upper atmosphere, the swirling clouds of Novastra collapsing into a distant mosaic of rust and ash. Elias rose and sealed the hatch to the cargo hold, leaving the blanket and data module safe in Serapha's care. He returned to the pilot's console. "Autopilot engaged," he said, toggling the switch. The ship's timbre softened into a low hum, and the course stabilized toward the patrol lanes. He took a final glance at Serapha, poised, resolute, a single beacon of color in the sterile cockpit. "May the stars guide you," he said quietly. Her reply was simple, yet carried the weight of a vow. "And may your kindness light our path." As the shuttle slipped into the void beyond Novastra's gravity well, Serapha activated the holographic interface. Light wove itself from the blanket's residual energy, projecting the mosaic of her people's history directly into the module's crystal core. Each star-born melody, each tapestry of memory, sealed itself in digital starlight, ready to be shared with every survivor, every hidden colony, every fragment of her world still reaching for hope. Elias watched the distant glow of Novastra fade to black, and then turned off the viewport lights. In the gentle darkness, he allowed himself a single moment of vulnerability, a sigh for what he had lost in leaving her, and a surge of longing for what might come next. The patrol ships would arrive at dawn. They would find 2 survivors, a human, captain, and an alien girl, bound together by a blanket that held galaxies. And when they learned the story of Serapha's people, they would carry that story across the stars. Elias closed his eyes and spoke into the silent cockpit. "Fly safe, Serapha." In the quiet that followed, the shuttle's engines whispered their steady promise, and the final image of Novastra's twin sunsets burned bright in his mind, a memory of warmth and of a gift that would forever light the darkness of space.